The band has been here since at least 7:15. Some of them got here a little bit earlier than that, and it's been a long morning for them, and so I do want to thank them. There are a couple of the people in the kids wing who have been here since 8:30, even though we didn't have kids programs there, but they were getting things ready, and I appreciate that. And certainly the guys in the soundboard and the slides. We don't know yet because of the planning ahead how long we'll do this 3-service thing. I hope we're not really ready to do it yet. It's because of the social mandate, social distancing, and all that stuff. Hopefully we can get back to 2 services. I like it when it's crowded, but I know crowded makes everybody nervous right now, so we're trying to be as smart about that as we can. Because of the 3 services, I have been very careful about my time in the first 2 services. If you go too long, first service, it bleeds into every other service after that. But now there's nothing holding me back. So this will be really the extended version sermon that the other services have missed out on. And actually, I won't do that to you. I was wondering if there would be people when I said that who would be saying, "I knew we should have went to second service. I told you, let's go to second, but you said no, we got to wait till third." So that was more like that. It'll be a quicker service, hopefully, and as we try to work through this deal this morning together. This Sunday is Palm Sunday. 2,000 years ago, give or take, Jesus rode into Jerusalem. It was the last week of his life, and he knew that it was the last week of his life. And when he rode into the city, there was a huge parade of people with palm branches celebrating his coming. And this kicks off, as Danielle mentioned earlier, this kicks off the Holy Week for the church. This Sunday through next Sunday, Easter Sunday, traditionally has been a high point in the church calendar as we remember Jesus last week. Now, because I'm a minister, but it's not just that. I mean, I've had a couple of different family members and a couple of different close friends. But because I'm a minister, probably more than most people, I have walked with lots of people, and when I say lots, a dozen people through the years who have been told by their doctor, you have this much time. And maybe it's 6 months, 6 to 8 months. Maybe it's a year or 2. But the doctor says, you need to get your affairs in order because the spot has come back, or the cancer is like this, or because of whatever else, and you need to get ready. You've got this much time. Now, at some level, every one of us knows we have this much time. We don't know how much this is, but we all know that there's I mean, we're not going to live to be 1,000,000, right? So, I mean, all of us know we have to face that, but we all of us, me included, have a certain low-grade denial about thinking about it. But when the doctor calls you in and tells you that, well, then you have to think about it. And I've never known for sure if I'd hoped, I worry about it a little bit, that I would react the right way. I mean, how I want to react, because you don't know how you'll react until you're in a spot like that, how you're going to come through. Some of the people that I have walked with in that, when they were told that, they immediately got kind of selfish with everything. I mean, they were hard to get a hold of. They wouldn't return calls. They wouldn't set up to meet with you. They spent all their money on vacations, and they wanted to go see bucket list kind of stuff. I've known other people who, when they found out, they kind of isolated. Just didn't talk to anybody, kind of real depressed. I've known some people who didn't change at all. I mean, they didn't, and I guess maybe that's what I hope, that I'd be living such a great life that it wouldn't affect me to find out something like that. And I've known a lot of people who, when they find out that, they really go to great effort to make sure the ones they're leaving behind will be taken care of. It's kind of an all-consuming thought. But whatever, there's no way that a person can be told that, a human being can be told that, without it affecting you pretty deep. And Jesus, though he was fully God, was also fully man. And Jesus knew on Palm Sunday 2,000 years ago that he had this much time. He knew in less than a week he would be on a cross. He knew that the wheels of that were already in motion, and there's no getting away from it. And it sets up a lot of dual ways to look at Jesus for this week. On the one hand, it seems like he can't get away from this. Judas is already working to betray him behind the scenes, and the Pharisees are meeting privately, and the Romans are getting involved. But at the same time, Jesus seems like he's also completely in control. So it's all happening, but he's completely in control. He will say, nobody's taken my life away. but I'm going to lay it down. And even for Judas, he sends Judas out. Hey, what you're getting ready to do, go do it. He's just not fooled by anything. Jesus, the whole week, is going to be surrounded by people. He's the most popular man in the city for the whole last week of his life. Everybody wants to be close to Jesus. In fact, the Pharisees who are wanting to arrest him, to put him on a cross, they have to get Judas to help him to find a time when he's not surrounded by people. You need to find a time when he's quiet. We can get him where nobody's around. And so you got that picture of Jesus, the life of the party the whole week. But there's also this picture of Jesus where it just seems like he's lonely. That he knows what's going on and no one else does. And in his own mind, in his own world, he's carrying a burden that nobody else is carrying. And you feel that tension again. He's popular, but he's all alone. The wheels are turning, but he's in complete control. And then on Palm Sunday especially, there's this notion that he's a king, and he expects to be treated like a king. But he's also a servant, and he's humble, and he's gentle, and even though he's got all this stuff going on, he's got time for people. And you're going to see both of those things, I think, in the Palm Sunday story. So without any more delay, let me just tell you quickly about what happened. And this is all in Matthew 21. It's a familiar story if you've been to Palm Sunday before. It seems like it's always some of the verses we talk about. They approached Jerusalem. If you know, a quick geography lesson and Bible lesson, Jesus on the Friday before he died was in a town called Jericho. And the Jericho road from Jericho to Jerusalem is about 17 miles, and it's a climb. 3,000 feet of climb from Jericho by the Dead Sea and Jerusalem on top of a mountain. And so you can do it in a day, 17 miles in a day, 3,000 foot climb. You can do that, but it's a big day, even in that era when people were walking all the time. And so that Friday night before he dies, he gets to a town called Bethany, just outside of Jerusalem, and he spends the night there with some friends, and he'll spend the whole next day on the Sabbath with friends. But there's this whole crowd of people who are coming with Jesus, and they're camping outside of the house, and they're all around, right? This huge crowd of people, and there's all kinds of people in the crowd. It mentions some beggars who come and follow Jesus. He says, well, come on. And they're out in front yelling Hosanna to Jesus. And there's prostitutes, and there's criminals and thieves, and there's some rich people, and there's some the pretty people and the not so pretty people, and this huge mob. And they're with Jesus as he's going to Jerusalem. And none of them have, very few of them have any weapons. There's not like they're not ready to take over that way. They're putting all their hope for the takeover in Jesus. Jesus, the miracle worker, Jesus, the prophet from Galilee, he's going to be the one to rattle cages. And that's where this all starts. So they're approaching Jerusalem. They've hiked up the Jericho road. This huge crowd of people is with them. And they're coming over the Mount of Olives. On the west side of the city, the Mount of Olives looks over the city, and they're coming over that city. And this huge mob of people coming over the city. And the people in the city could look up and see them coming. And so people from the city are coming out to meet, and he's coming down. And as he's coming over the hill, he sends a couple of his guys. He says, I want you to go into the village ahead of us, and you're going to find a donkey tied there and the colt right beside him. I want you to untie him and bring him to me. And if anyone asks you, hey, what are you doing? You say, the Lord needs them. He'll send them right back. And there's some guys who think that what Jesus is doing here is, you're stealing this guy's donkey, and he's going to be mad. So, well, God wants it. And that's possible. That's what's going on. But I think when Jesus says Lord here, he's talking about himself. And I think Jesus has set this all up ahead of time because Jesus wants to come into the city a certain way. He wants it to look like something. And it tells you, the next verse, this all took place to fulfill what the prophet said. And here it is. There's a verse in Zechariah. See, daughter Zion, see your king comes to you gentle and riding on a donkey and on a colt, the foal of a donkey. So what Jesus is hoping is when people see him come down the Mount of Olives into the city, they're going to think of this verse. Zechariah wrote it 500 or 600 years before Jesus came. But people, good Jewish boys and girls, good Jewish men and women learned this stuff. They knew this verse, and they knew that one day the king of Israel, the Messiah, the one they were all waiting for, was going to come into the city, and he'd be riding on a donkey's colt, and that's how you would know. And Jesus on purpose wants to ride in that way because he wants them to see him as a king. Now, some people who are far from Christianity, far from God, far from church kind of stuff, they try to pick at Christians and kind of it's a myth kind of thing. Jesus never claimed to be anything. He's just a good teacher. He never claimed to be anything special. But that's not true because of verses like this. He on purpose picks the ride that he picks so the town will know who he is. He wants them to see him that way. He wants them to know that he's their king. And I think that's important. I think it's important that we have that in our head. But it's more than this. He does more than just this. The disciples went and they took care of the animal. They brought the donkey and the colt and they placed their cloaks on the donkey for Jesus to ride on the colt. And a very large crowd of people spread their cloaks on the road, and others cut branches. And John tells us they're palm branches. That's where we get Palm Sunday. They're palm branches, and they spread those on the road, and they're waving them around. So you get this picture in your head too. First of all, one of the little miracles about this whole story, if you know anything about horses or donkeys for that matter, it mentions the colt had never been ridden. And Jesus hops on this animal that's never been ridden, and he rides it through the parade. Big mob of people, very large crowd. And so one of the little miracles, it's not ever called a miracle, but it kind of is that he's able to ride this animal in the parade. I mean, he has control of it. That Jesus, so there's even a little bit of a thing going on there. I'm sure that the disciples expected to be holding on to that donkey for, as soon as they got on it, they'd be going every which direction. But Jesus has complete control of the situation. And the palm branches are important. And if you don't know your history, bear with me just for a second. I'm going to try to tell it. Jerusalem as a city had been conquered a lot of times. The Babylonians conquered it, and then the Persians, and then the Greeks, and then the Romans. But the Greeks, they had a campaign to try to eliminate Judaism. They were just going to eliminate it altogether, and the Greeks were hoping that the Jewish people would quit being Jewish, and they would start worshiping the Greek gods, Zeus and Apollo and all of that. And so a lot of persecution. A lot of Jews died trying to keep their faith, and the Greeks it was a bloody kind of a thing. And after the persecution had went on for a few years, a guy named Judas Maccabees came along. And the reason why there's two Judases in the disciples, and one of Jesus' brothers is named Judas. Judas became a popular name after that because of this Judas Maccabees. And Judas Maccabees raises an army up, and he chases the Greeks out of Jerusalem, frees the city from the Greeks. The Greeks all take off and run away. And when Maccabees goes into the city, palm branches are his symbol. People are waving palm branches. And so palm branches in Jewish thinking became like Independence Day. We shoot fireworks off on the 4th of July because of the rockets' red glare and the national anthem. When you see the flag, you think about the 50 stars and the 13 stripes and what all that means, and it all has significance, right? Well, a Jewish mind in Jesus' day, when they saw the palm branches, they thought Independence Day. And it all goes back to that Judas Maccabees. It goes back to a couple hundred years. For a couple hundred years, just like as America, we're a little more than a couple hundred years old, and we still celebrate that, right? I mean, we still celebrate George Washington and crossing the Delaware and Abraham Lincoln, and we put statues up to these guys, and just seeing their faces or seeing the flag should evoke some memory to you. And when a Jewish person in Jesus' day saw a palm branch, they thought, here comes the king. Here comes the guy who's going to set us free. And the Romans who are occupying the city, they would have seen that, and that's what they would have thought was being said. But even if that's not obvious enough, so first of all, he's riding on a donkey to fulfill this prophecy, the palm branches, but the crowds start shouting stuff. They say, Hosanna to the Son of David. And Hosanna means save us. Well, save us from who? Well, the Romans. So what they're hoping Jesus will do is come in here and kick some butt and chase the Romans out of here, which would have been very good news for the Jews, but I would assume, irritate a lot of Romans who were there occupying the city. And this son of David thing, David was the most famous king in the history of Israel, so they're telling Jesus, you're going to be the new David. You're going to be the guy who's going to come kill giants. You're going to be the guy who rules this city and takes it back from those god-awful Romans. And when Jesus came into the city, the whole city was stirred up. Who is this guy? They said. And the crowds answered, it's Jesus. He's a prophet from Nazareth in Galilee. All of this barking and yelling and everything else was making the religious authorities pretty nervous. And so when they saw all the stuff that was happening, all the way that people were acting, and it mentions the children shouting songs, Hosanna to the Son of David. So it's apparently become a chant or a song that they're singing, and the kids are dancing around and they're singing this thing, and certainly in Jesus' day, children were not meant to be heard, and they're making all this noise and racket, and it ticked them off. The religious leaders ticked them off for a couple reasons. First of all, they were jealous of Jesus getting more attention than they were getting. I'm sure that was part of it. Jesus was claiming more than just being a king. He was claiming to be God. That was ticking off the religious leaders because how dare you? And then there's this risk. I mean, you tick the Romans off enough, we're all going to be in trouble. You need to shut up here. You're taking it a little too far. And so they say, do you hear what the kids are saying? And he says, I do. In fact, he says, have you never read? He quotes a Bible verse to them. From the lips of children and infants, you have ordained praise. You have called forth praise. In other words, Jesus says, I hear it. Boy, isn't it great? Isn't it awesome? Later, some of the Pharisees in the crowd said to Jesus, you need to rebuke your disciples. And again, for the things they're saying. And Jesus said, I tell you, if they stay quiet, the stones will cry out. In other words, he's saying, God himself wants me cheered today. God himself is hoping that I get a big round of applause today. And again, it's crazy stuff to say if you're just a good teacher. Good teachers don't say this kind of stuff. Jesus didn't think he was just a good teacher. Jesus thought he was king. And he expected everybody to bow their knee. And that's worth thinking about. If we had more time, we might just stop right there and think about that for 5 minutes, because that's worth thinking about. Jesus is a king and he expects to be obeyed. He's a king and he expects you to bow your knee to him. He's a king and he expects you to do what he tells you to do. Yes, sir. No, sir. Remember Forrest Gump, the movie Forrest Gump? What are you supposed to do, Gump? Whatever you tell me, drill sergeant. You're a genius, Gump. That's what he's expecting, right? That's what he's expecting. Whatever I tell you to do, that's what you do. But there's more to it than that, and I want to think about that if we can. Because it says your king comes to you gentle. Jesus could have picked any Bible verse to announce himself, and he picks that one. He wants to come gentle. And I want to think about that word gentle, because that's also important. There's a guy named, I wrote his name down, so I keep forgetting it, Paul Hebert. He was a professor at Fuller. And Paul Hebert had a theory of politics that he called bounded sets and centered sets. A bounded set has rules around it, like a big hard square or a big hard circle. These are the rules. And if you want to be part of our group, this is what you have to do. You got to do these things. And if you don't do these things, you're not in our group. And it's real firm. You can picture a farmer who builds a fence around his place, and he spends a lot of money getting the fence just right. He's constantly repairing it and constantly getting it right. The animals have to stay in. As long as they're inside the fence, they're his animals. And most groups do that. They have very hard rules. These are our rules. And if you want to be one of us, you got to do this. Now, in politics, sometimes you'll see somebody who's a lifelong Republican or Democrat who votes against the party on an issue. And Twitter will explode. Fox News and MSNBC will go nuts. He's a Republican in name only, or he's left the reservation. And it's hard to get people on one side of the aisle to cross the other side because you don't want to take that risk. We have a very set group, a bounded set. And you can do bounded sets with anything. You can do it with racially. If you're black, you need to be like this. If you're white, you need to be like. You can do it with economics. If you're rich or poor, you got to be like this. If you're part of our club, a part of our group, you got to do these things. And religion does it a lot. If you want to be a good religious person, then you have to do all these things. And there are certain sins that you can do and still be in the circle. And there's certain sins you can, if you do them, though, you're going to be out. And sometimes that can evolve, what that is. When I first became a Christian, if you wanted to find the elders of the church, they'd be outside in front smoking after the service, right? But if one of the elders lit up after the service today, it'd probably be a board meeting about just that if he was out there in the parking lot smoking. And it's weird how the rules change, but they do. Different eras of church, divorce has been looked at differently. Different eras of the church, how you parent is looked at differently. Different eras of the church, homosexuality or your work ethic it changes sometimes. But whatever, there's certain rules, and if you don't obey these rules, you're out. It's a bounded set. Well, Paul Hebert said, but there's also another way to do it. There's a centered set, kind of an idea. If the bounded set is a farmer with a good fence around, a centered set is a farmer who puts a big well in the middle of his property. And the animals never get too far from the well because that's where the life is. So you don't need a fence. I mean, they may wander out a little bit, but they'll always come back to the well. And so the well becomes the center of it. And it's not graded so much by whether you're in the box, but whether you're moving towards the center or not. And his argument for politics would be, I mean, we don't agree, Republicans and Democrats, on everything. Sure, that's true. But I mean, there's got to be some things we agree on. And so you start with the issue that we all agree on, and let's focus on that. Like, I mean, we don't all agree on abortion policy, but we all agree, don't we, that abortions should be rare? I mean, it wasn't that many years ago that Bill Clinton said that in a speech. That it should be, surely we agree on that. I mean, we don't all agree on gun control. I get that, but surely we all agree that people getting shot in a supermarket's bad, right? We don't all agree on how to fix poverty, but we all agree poverty's bad. I mean, we all agree on that, right? And so you start with what we all agree on. And you don't start with the bounded sets. You start on the stuff that we all agree about, and then you try to think about, well, how can we fix that? And there might be lots of different ideas, and that's okay. That's to be expected. But we shouldn't just bash somebody because they leave their set to deal with it. Historically, William Wilberforce on slavery, his coalition, he was a British a man who was the ringleader to get slavery outlawed in Britain, which really set the ball rolling to finally get it outlawed here. His coalition to get rid of slavery was a pretty diverse group. A lot of them hated one another, but they all agreed that it was wrong for some human beings to own other human beings. And Wilberforce didn't really care if the guys joining him were Christians or whatever they were. He didn't care if they were Catholics. He didn't care if they were Protestants. He didn't care if they were rich or poor or whatever party they were part of. He only cared if we agreed on this one issue. Abraham Lincoln was like that. Abraham Lincoln recruited guys to be his Secretary of State and Secretary of Treasury and Secretary of the Navy, guys who really didn't like him very much. His Secretary of War had called Lincoln a big gorilla, and because he was tall and kind of gangly, and he called him a big gorilla and had mocked him real publicly and different things. But these were the best guys, and Lincoln didn't care if they liked him. They don't have to like me. We've got to get this done. Actually, Larry Bird was like that. Larry Bird and McHale hated each other, but they sure liked to win titles. And you know, you can put a lot of the other stuff aside as long as you're focused on the main thing. Okay, well, Jesus, his kingdom is more of a centered deal. It's not really got boundaries around it that are easy to see. It's about whether or not you're coming close to Jesus. Think again about this Palm Sunday. There were some really religious people there. I mean, they were good people. They never drank to excess. They never cheated on their husbands or wives. They never cheated on money. I mean, as far as anybody could tell, they were deep people. But when Jesus came, these were the guys who were mad. And they looked like they should be in, but they were really out. And then there's other guys with Jesus, and they're just beggars and prostitutes and criminals and thieves, and they look like to all the world they should be out, but they're in because they're following Jesus. And it's not really so much about what all you've done or not done. I mean, it's not like that doesn't matter. It's good to be good, but Jesus didn't come to make people good. He came to breathe life into dead people. And some of the people who were following Jesus were dead inside before he came along. And he was making them live again. And ultimately was going to make them live again forever. And so C.S. Lewis has a long quote about this, that there's no 100% Christians. We're all in process. And we're either walking towards Jesus or we're walking away from him. And there's no middle ground to that. And Jesus is king, and he just calls you to keep coming back to him. Just keep coming back. Now, the hard part about that, the tension of that in my head, I told you he was a king and a servant at the same time, but what's that do to me? I mean, if he's a king, then I got to give him everything, but I know that I can't. I mean, I've learned finally about myself that I don't have it in me to be good all the time. So what I end up and do is I learn how to camouflage my badness. I learn how to manage my badness. I learn to watch my how I talk in front of certain people, right? I learn what I can't bring up and what I can bring up. I learn how to keep my temper in check around certain people. So I'll look righteous whether or not I am righteous. I know who I am. And Jesus is my king, but I know that I'm not capable of following him. And yet Jesus says, well, just walk this direction. Just chop in the parade with all the rest of us. And let's just see where this goes. And anybody can. And that's really good news. I'll have the band come back up. Have you ever had a chance to meet one of your heroes in anything? I mean, they may not be a hero to anybody else, but they're a hero to you. Maybe it's you've read their book, or they're the highest one up in your company, or they're somebody that you followed from a distance for however long, and they mean a lot to you. They're really important to you, but they're not necessarily somebody who's famous, just famous to you. Or maybe they are famous, Maybe you've met somebody who really is famous and everybody knows who they are, and you get a chance to meet them and you've looked forward to it for so long. What I have found is it's always a little disappointing when that's happened. It's always a little disappointing to get to meet them because you don't know what to say. And they're too busy to deal with you. And you don't know what to even get into. There's a Chris Farley skit about it where Chris Farley meets Paul McCartney. And it's like, hey, remember when you wrote that song, Imagine? Or where that song, that was cool, Or remember when you were with the Beatles? Yeah, it was great. And you don't know what to say. You have no idea what to even toss out. And you feel small, and you don't want to hold that guy very long. He's got places to go, and he's way too busy to deal with somebody like you. That's why the Palm Sunday picture is important again, because the people coming with Jesus have his complete attention. It says when he comes in, Luke mentions he starts crying, and not because he's worried about his last week, because he's worried about Jerusalem. You have no idea what's going on. He's crying over the city, and you don't even know what's happening. When this parade was leaving Jericho and getting ready to head up the mountain, there's two blind beggars who call out to him and say, Son of David, save us. And he says, come on. He's always saying, come on. Because it's not so much about your location, where you're at, it's about your momentum. Where are you going? And wherever you're at, Jesus can start with you right there and bring you to where he is. And that's just powerfully good news. No matter where you are, no matter what you've done, Jesus invites you to come. And it never really stops. I mean, this whole last week of his life, a teacher in the law comes and asks him, what's the greatest commandment? And Jesus stops and talks to him and says, hey, you're not far from the kingdom of God, and invites him to come back closer. On the last night before he dies, the disciples are all angry with each other, and nobody's volunteering to serve. So Jesus takes his own robe off and starts washing their feet and doing the slave job that nobody else will do. He's hanging on the cross, breathing his last couple of breaths, and the thief beside him says, Jesus, you got a minute? And he does. He's always got a minute. And if anybody wants to approach Jesus and come close to him, you can. And then you're in. Just like that. So at the end of the service here, we're going to ask people on both sides praying, and I'll be praying here in the middle. And if anybody wants to come up and pray about anything, know that this time is open for you. Whatever you're dealing with, whatever grief you're dealing with, whatever anxiety or fear or frustration or sin, or just pray for somebody else you know. God, give them strength. Take advantage of this time and come pray with us. Won't you stand up? We'll let the band close with one last song.